Good evening. Before this video ends, you will hear the name of a military operation the U.S. government insists does not exist. You will hear how American soldiers were sent into a war zone without uniforms, without dog tags, and without permission from Congress. And you will hear why 14 bodies were flown into Dover Air Force Base at 3 a.m. through a hangar reserved for fallen soldiers while the public was told no American boots are on the ground. This footage was not meant to leave a classified room in Washington, but it did. And once you hear what was said behind those closed doors, you will understand why this video does not want to stay online. To understand the gravity of this leak, you have to understand the setting. We are taking you inside room SDG50 of the Dirksen Senate Office Building. This is a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. The walls are lined with copper foil to block electronic signals. The air is filtered to prevent acoustic eavesdropping. Before entering, every senator, every general, and every aide must surrender their phones, smartwatches, and recording devices. In theory, it is a black hole. Nothing comes out, but on the morning of January 14th, something did come out. A digital recording that proves the official narrative of the war in Eastern Europe is a fabrication. The agenda that morning was listed as a classified assessment of Eastern Front stability. At the head of the mahogany table sat Senator Lindsey Graham. For decades, Graham has been the heartbeat of the war machine in Washington. If there is a conflict, he wants in. If there is a weapon system, he wants to sell it. According to the audio logs provided to us by a source inside the room, a source who is currently risking federal imprisonment just by sharing this, Graham was in high spirits. He began the briefing with a level of arrogance that is hard to stomach. He wasn't speaking like a public servant. He was speaking like a conqueror. He assured the gathered generals that the strategy of strategic ambiguity was a masterclass. He told them that they had the Russians chasing shadows. He claimed they were bleeding the enemy's economy dry. And most importantly, he emphasized that they hadn't lost a single American soldier. Not one. He called it the perfect war. Clean, efficient, profitable. Most of the people in that room nodded. They opened their binders, checked their mental stock portfolios, and prepared to rubber stamp Graham's request for another $10 billion. But at the far end of the table, Tulsi Gabbard sat in silence. She wasn't looking at the projector screen. She wasn't looking at Graham. She was staring at a manila envelope resting on her lap. She waited. She let Graham finish his victory lap. She let him commit to the lie completely. And then she turned on her microphone. The silence that followed was heavy. Tulsi didn't start with an accusation. She started with a trap. She knows how men like Graham operate. If you accuse them directly, they deflect. They call you unpatriotic. So she attacked him with the one thing a politician can't hide from, the math. She asked him, for the official record, to clarify a specific line item in the Defense Appropriations Act. She asked about the undisclosed $50 million surge in the medical evacuation budget for the European Command. Graham laughed. He actually laughed. He thought she was nitpicking. He replied that it was a contingency fund. He called it humanitarian aid. Bandages, plasma, antibiotics for the local allies. He called it standard procedure. Standard procedure. That was the trap. Graham walked right into it. Because Tulsi Gabbard is a combat veteran, she served in medical units, she knows exactly what humanitarian aid looks like on a manifest. And she knows that you don't ship bandages on a stealth transport. It's a flight in the middle of the night. She leaned forward and her tone changed. She said that if it was just humanitarian aid, she was confused about the logistics. She asked why, if these were just supplies. The shipment was offloaded at Dover Air Force Base last Tuesday at 3 a.m., and she asked why it was processed, specifically through Hangar 4. If you are a civilian, Hangar 4 might not mean anything to you. But in that room, the temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. Dover Air Force Base is where all American combat casualties return home. And Hangar 4 is the restricted facility used exclusively for what the military calls dignified transfers. It is where the caskets arrive. It is where the bodies are processed. You do not send bandages to Hangar 4, you send the fallen. Graham's smile vanished. The color drained from his face. He knew, in that split second, that Tulsi wasn't guessing. She knew he tried to pivot. He raised his voice, claiming she was conflating routine logistics with operational details she didn't understand. He said that, sometimes due to runway traffic, cargo is routed to different terminals. He said it was offensive to suggest they were hiding casualties, but Tulsi didn't blink. She told him she wasn't suggesting anything. She was reading from the flight manifest of a C-17 Globemaster. Tail number 088194. She read the cargo designation code. HR, human remains. Count 14. Graham slammed his hand on the table. The sound distorted the recording for a split second. He shouted that it was classified data. He demanded to know where she got the flight log. He yelled that she was violating federal law by reading that in the room, and there it was. The confession. Notice what he didn't say? He didn't say that's not true. He shouted, that's classified. In Washington, that is the only difference between a lie and a state secret. By admitting the document was classified, he inadvertently admitted it was real. He wasn't angry because Tulsi was lying. He was angry because she had found the bodies he'd tried to hide. Graham tried to recover. You can hear the stammering in his voice on the tape. He tried to dismiss the casualty count as a training accident involving private contractors. He used every buzzword in the book to dehumanize those 14 men. He called them assets. He called them personnel. He refused to call them soldiers, but Tulsi didn't let him breathe. She didn't scream. She didn't interrupt. She just waited for him to stop talking. And then she dropped the name that turned that hearing into a crime scene. She looked him dead in the eye and asked him to talk about the mission these 14 men died for. She asked him to talk about Operation Ghostwatch. Ghostwatch. If you are listening to this, write that name down before it gets scrubbed from the internet. Before this leak, Ghostwatch was just a rumor. A conspiracy theory on dark web forums. But Tulsi Gabbard confirmed it in open session. She explained exactly what it was. She told the room that Ghostwatch is a Pentagon directive that strips active duty, special forces of their rank and identity before deploying them into undeclared war zones. They surrender their dog tags. They surrender their U.S. flags. If they live, they get paid in cash from black budget accounts. If they die, they simply vanish. Graham's face reportedly turned pale. He knew that name wasn't on any document Tulsi was supposed to have access to. He stammered, claiming that the operation didn't exist, that she was reading internet fairy tales into the congressional record. That was the moment Tulsi reached under the table. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out something far more dangerous to a man like Lindsey Graham. She pulled out a red folder. She slid the folder across the long mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Graham. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper with a heavy red ink stamp at the top. Tulsi began to read it aloud for the record. She cited Executive Order Authorization, Code 19 Bravo. Subject, Covert Deployment of Specialized Infantry to the Donetsk region. Directive, all personnel are to be stripped of U.S. military identification. In the event of death or capture, status shall be listed as private contractor to avoid congressional oversight. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. Then she delivered the final blow. She told him that he signed it. She pointed out the date 3 months ago. She told him that he authorized the deployment of American troops into a hot war zone and explicitly ordered the Pentagon to lie to the families of the fallen. She told him he turned our soldiers into ghosts so he could play risk-free chess with Russia. The reaction in the room was chaotic. Generals stood up. Aides were frantically whispering. This wasn't just a political debate anymore. This was evidence of a felony. This was proof that the War Powers Act had been violated. Graham lunged toward his microphone. He was desperate now. He screamed that it was a draft document, a contingency plan that was never operational. He claimed she was taking a hypothetical scenario and presenting it as fact, but Tulsi was ready for that lie too. She pointed to the second item in the folder. A photograph. A gritty, black and white surveillance shot taken at Ramstein Air Base, just 48 hours prior. She slid the photo across the table. It stopped right in front of Graham. She asked him quietly, "If it was a draft, why is this photo dated 3 days ago?" She told him it showed the casket of Sergeant Michael Davis, one of his so-called hypothetical soldiers, being loaded onto that plane. And she told him to look closely at the paperwork on the clipboard in the photo. It cited his authorization code, 19-Bravo. Graham stared at the photo. He couldn't look away. The evidence was irrefutable. He had sent men to die, erased their identities, and was now caught trying to bury the truth along with their bodies. Tulsi stood up. She towered over him, not physically, but morally. She told him he lied to the committee. She told him he lied to the American people. And worst of all, she told him he lied to the mother of Sergeant Davis. She told him he claimed her son died in a Jeep accident in Germany. Denying him the flag he died for, Graham looked around the room, looking for an ally, looking for anyone to jump in and save him. But the generals looked down. The aides looked away. He was alone. And then Tulsi whispered the word that echoed off the walls: treason. She told him she was not going to let him bury this. Graham's eyes darted to the recording light on the wall console. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that history was watching. His final words on the tape were not an apology. They were an order. He hissed at them to turn it off. He demanded they clear the room. Shortly after, Senator Graham screamed for the recording to be stopped. The audio feed was cut. The screen went black. What happened inside that room after the cameras went off is something we can only speculate about. But we know this. Tulsi Gabbard walked out of that SCIF with the red folder still in her hand. And Lindsey Graham has not answered a single question about Operation Ghostwatch since that day. We are taking a massive risk by hosting this footage. The establishment is working overtime to scrub the mention of Protocol 4 from every server and every search engine. They want this video to disappear. They want the truth about Sergeant Davis and the 14 others to remain buried in Hangar. 4. That is why I am not asking you to like this video. I am asking you to be a witness. They can delete this channel, but they cannot delete it from your memory. If this video goes dark, it is up to you to keep the truth alive. Download it, archive it, discuss it. Tulsi Gabbard did her part inside that room. Now, the rest is up to you. Do not let them bury this.